What we were going to do is I was going to talk about VoiceThread in terms of the difference that I've noticed in using VoiceThread to give feedback from a faculty perspective to a student versus giving other kinds of feedback to a student. And then I believe Kim was going to talk about using feedback for student-to-student feedback, peer feedback.
Yep.
And then I believe Stacy was going to talk about sort of more structural concerns, like if you're going to use it for feedback, how do you set your class up and where do you put it? All right, so let me give you a little bit of context on the class these comments come out of, so you have an understanding of what the activity was. So this is English 478, which is writing as reflective practice. This is from last fall. And in the class, students do a substantial amount of time writing an expository paper of their topic choice. And then they get feedback from peers, and then they revise it, and then they turn it in to me and get feedback from me, and then they hold on to it. And then they do a fiction paper and using the same process. And then when they have both sets in front of them that have been through peer feedback and instructor feedback, and they decide which one they really want to invest substantial time into a deep revision. So they pick one, and then one of the two gets revised another time while we're studying about sort of deeper revision strategies. And so what I did this last fall was the first set of papers, the expository ones, I gave them feedback using VoiceThread. And the second set, the fiction papers, I gave them feedback using marginal comments, using track changes, and then end comments. So it was really interesting to hear their thoughts on the two different modalities of feedback. And I noticed some interesting things in terms of how they revised. So I was going to show you a little bit of what I did in terms of the kind of thing I said to the student. And then I pulled some clips out from their, they also write these cover letters with their revision where they talk about what they changed and why they changed it and how it relates to the research we've been reading and activities they've been doing. So I pulled out the excerpts that related to VoiceThread overall so you could see what the students had to say. Does that make sense? So here's Jordan's paper. Jordan gave me permission to, okay, so I thought I would play you like the first couple of minutes and then maybe the last couple of minutes so you get an idea of how I started and how I ended. It's altogether, it's about 7 or 8 minutes. I had to read them through once before I did the video in order to think about what I wanted to say to the student and just make a few notes. And then the second time through, I recorded it. And I generally left in some of the awkward pauses and ums and things because I wanted it to be like a conversation with the student. And Kim and Stacy and I looked at a little bit of research that talks about the importance of establishing sort of a real relationship with students. And if you sound like a real person, I feel like they have more trust in what you're saying because they do ums and things like that too. So here we go. So what you're hearing is probably the first take of a second reading of the paper. So let me just play a couple of minutes and then I'll scoot ahead to the end.
Jordan, this is Mary Adler, and I just finished reading How to Be an Awkward Adolescent, and I loved it. It was very entertaining, cringe-worthy, bittersweet, and just really a wonderful tone. For the most part, I think you hit just the right note in this piece. I really like the use of second person and the slightly satirical tone of voice. because it enables the reader to imagine it's happening to them, even though clearly this is mostly your memoir, but it reads, I think it's mostly your memoir, but it reads as sort of a something by extension that we all go through, as you kind of say at the end, similarities, similar patterns, similar stereotypes. So we can see ourselves in each of these situations in some way. And the ones we can't are just entertaining. I wonder about this beginning part right here, up to about here. Once I get to this part, I'm confident if you follow what I did, then the materials you will need are as follows. From there on, I'm here down, I'm pretty hooked on it. The beginning part was a...
So up to this point, you can see me, now I'm starting to walk through the paper with her. And I love this ability to mark on the text as you're talking about it. And I especially love that it goes away after you're done talking about it. So what that requires students to do is to either take notes or listen to it more than once if they want to remember. And that's one of the changes I noticed in the revisions, is that because they didn't have specific margin comments, they didn't just go back and fix that spot where I marked it, which is typically those of you who mark on students or have marked on students writing and then ask for revision in the past will know what I'm talking about. They'll go and fix the exact spot where you marked something and ignore the larger context that it fits into. A lot of students will do that. It's not probably due to laziness or something bad. It's more due to, this is the part you wanted me to fix, so I fixed it, right? And what I like about this as opposed to that is that it is a more holistic look at the paper and pointing out particular things, but how they relate to the whole of the piece. So I found that in revising these papers, students made more changes and they had more agency over their changes because they didn't have a record of exactly what I wanted them to fix. So I really like the opportunity to mark something and then the fact that it goes away. Right, and then let me scoot ahead to, okay, hold on. I want you to hear that part. Okay.
And, you know, we realize as adults that things don't work out for a reason, and we start to be grateful for the way things happened sometimes. And I think that's a good realization. I would say at the end, this last paragraph here, let me do it in green, on page 6, is a little bit abrupt. I feel like it had this lovely pacing all the way through. And then it just kind of stops. And maybe you ran out of things to say there, but I don't know. I'm thinking there might be, yeah, that's right. I'm thinking there might be more to say at the end here. The whole world outside of high school, this idea of college. Maybe if you just reread the essay and stop here, right there, and then just ask yourself, what do I want the reader to be thinking right now? And what am I thinking right now? And put this part away and just kind of free write for a bit. You might come to a more natural ending. There's nothing really wrong with this ending. It just, the rest of your essay is so lovely and surprising and funny that I guess I was hoping for a little bit more at the end.
So you get the idea of the voice, the whole of the VoiceThread. I did have students go back and listen multiple times to the VoiceThreads because it keeps track of how many times people have listened to it. And since they're the only ones who have access, I figure it must have been them doing that. And so that to me was a good sign that students were going back to hear the comments and think about it. And I tried not to be too prescriptive, but I feel like VoiceThread gives you a better vehicle. The best vehicle is probably to sit down with the student one-to-one and have this nice long 10-minute conversation with them, or more. But in lieu of that, I feel like this gives me an opportunity to say that, you know, provide a critique that, like the reason I played through the end is because I'm telling her something that didn't work for me as a reader, but in a way that has some context to it, in a way that she, you know, I didn't just write ending needs work or smiley face, but, you know, some way to make her motivated to still do that, but still leaving it up to her as to what the ending is, by giving her a strategy. So I really liked that it adds that context. And then I'll just share really quickly that, so I took excerpts from 4 students who I had in my file from last fall, because I didn't know I was going to do this talk last fall. But Jordan sent me an email about this, which is one of the reasons I used it. And she said, I actually really like the VoiceThread feedback. Are you seeing this page?
Yeah, we see it.
I like track changes, but with the voiceover, I was able to get a much clearer idea of what you wanted me to work on. I think that because you can point out exactly what you're referring to, while simultaneously speaking about it, it makes for more effective feedback. Which was my sense of what students liked about it. So it was good to hear back from her.